But even as the economy becomes radically conscious, the politicization of every issue is making leading by principle increasingly difficult for those wanting to do more than just make a profit. No matter their bent on the political spectrum, business leaders are being forced to choose sides on all kinds of issues. Neutrality as an option is fading as consumers and often employees and shareholders demand answers to social issues from company leadership. If there is an Overton window for what we have considered acceptable business conversation, similar to the range of what we have considered mainstream political conversation, it is shifting as the internet breaks down silos between our personal and professional lives. Not only does it feel more imperative than ever to run a socially conscious company and to live a socially conscious life, but the need to communicate about that imperative, to morally perform in the global social media theater, also seems increasingly paramount in an environment where not communicating might as well mean not existing. Because we've been given the most powerful digital megaphones in history in the form of our personal devices, a decision to not use those megaphones to speak out about an issue can be seen as a vote for the status quo. The new digital media environment has created a new kind of moral hazard for company leaders who now have to battle with perception and reputation on 1,000 fronts. But actual moral leadership, not just communicating well about social issues, remains difficult. I believe more difficult than we as consumers understand. The complexity of trying to operate at the intersection of business and social good is illustrated by how many separate conversations are happening with many different frameworks. Organizing structures like B corporations and L3Cs, low-profit limited liability companies. Accounting and financial frameworks like triple bottom line and ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And networks like conscious capitalism and Kindred. The environment has become rich with perspectives about why we should run a conscious company. It is increasingly flooded with models for how to measure a company's commitment to social good. But left out of this conversation is an acknowledgement that the transition from the status quo to better is actually extremely difficult. As business gets pulled into politics, complicated issues get painted as black and white because our ideologies don't allow much room for gray. But businesses operate in complex environments, with every decision creating cascading effects both for the company's profitability and the communities in which the companies operate. We expect company leaders to operate with perfect moral clarity and are quick to call them out when we believe they are making decisions for the sake of profit alone. But I know from experience that executives often want to do the right thing and are frequently faced with a lack of clarity on what the right thing may be in a particular situation. Leadership requires moral imagination and intentionality. And for certain types of companies, leadership comes with a lot of historical baggage in the form of moral and technical debt, liabilities built up over time based on how those companies have chosen to operate since their founding. Traditional change management models don't acknowledge the speed and complexity of operating in a digital world. They focus on one linear, often highly technical initiative at a time, rather than on providing tools across multiple horizons to tackle cascading effects and impending disruptions. They also don't provide for the kind of philosophical underpinning needed to move in a more ethical direction as a company. The hyper-moralized media environment in which we operate doesn't allow for making mistakes without an avalanche of negative attention, meaning companies have to master not only operating more ethically, but also communicating more aggressively about the kinds of changes they're making, as well as acknowledging and responding to mistakes more quickly. If we're truly going to move the global economy in a more ethical and inclusive direction, we need new rules for how we change, and more leaders need to master adaptive change as a core competency. I've always been fascinated by change, how we as individuals make brave choices to go in new directions, as well as how society evolves over time and institutions change in response. I even have a tattoo of a delta, the mathematical symbol for change, on my arm. After majoring in history as an undergraduate and eventually going back to school for my MBA, I became fascinated with the historical dissonance the internet was creating between the old power structures and new media. I especially felt that social media presented an opportunity for corporations, non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and governments to hear directly from their people about what they wanted. Throughout my career working for global consulting firms, communications agencies, startups, and nonprofits, and as a political organizer for President Barack Obama, that dissonance continued to force change in all areas of society, not always for the better, even as old institutions dragged their bureaucratic feet. To this day, coming out of a once-in-a-lifetime global pandemic